Hi everyone, I bought a book 6 months ago to help an online friend who really wanted it. The title is Notre sixième sens, in English or Sixth Sense, by Charles Richet, written in 1928, and I think this edition is from 1936, and as you can see, it is an old book. This book is only intended to prove that the real arrives at the human intelligence by way which are not the usual sensory way, to prove that there is indeed a sixth sense, a knowledge of reality, by means other than the normal sensory channel, and he emits the hypothesis of the vibration of the reality that surrounds us. For over 50 years, he conducted multiple experiments with the people and on himself. He summarized the knowledge acquired, the fact, observation and experience in his Traité de Métapsychique, later translated in English, German and Spanish, Metapsychic Treatise, y en español, Tratado de Metapsíquica. He simply used the two unshakable foundations of all science and classical method of physiology, observation and experience, to conclude that the reality of the sixth sense cannot be denied, and that it involves the vibration of the reality. He showed and proved that in certain exceptional, extremely rare cases, the external world manifests itself to intelligence in other ways than the normal sensory pathway, other than our five common physical senses. The testimonies that he reports really demonstrate that there is a sixth sense, exceptional individual in whom the sixth sense appears, have it only in quick, almost elusive flashes. But because a phenomenon is rare and unusual, we have no right to conclude that it does not exist. He called the sixth sense this mysterious sensibility which reveals to us in a few fleeting moments and in an imperfect way a fragment of reality, a sensitivity that has the effect of bringing us some knowledge of reality, a knowledge of reality by means other than the usual sensory means. In the book, he focused on the fact, and only on the fact, that can be explained by the sixth sense. He wanted to prove that there are, within human knowledge, realities in our normal senses, not bringing knowledge. In other words, the notion of a fragment of reality sometimes comes to us through channel other than the normal sensory channel. It is this path, still very mysterious, that he will call thought of the sixth sense. He would try to prove that the sixth sense exists without trying to penetrate its very mechanism, without claiming to deepen the condition in which it appears. We are surrounded by vibration, some of which shake and others do not shake the normal sensibility. For example, we have the attraction, the magnetic force, the current of high frequencies, the Hertzian wave, the ultraviolet and infrared rays in the solar spectrum. Beyond of them, there are chemical rays, and there is also the ultrasound and infrasound. To deny the existence of this vibration because we do not perceive them would be absurd. We have only a small open window on the immense universe. The vibrations that I quoted just before are non-vibration because human genius has found detector for them. There are surely other vibration and force that are quivering around us that our human faculties cannot detect. It is not because we don't perceive or detect something that it doesn't exist. He has divided metapsychic into two groups, the objective metapsychic and subjective metapsychic. He would gradually replace objective and subjective by mental and physical, mental metapsychic and physical metapsychic. The sixth sense constitutes a part, the most important, of the mental metapsychic. The study of the sixth sense relates to what our predecessors called second sight, mental suggestion through transfer, ill-seen, clairvoyance, lucidity. All these terms can be used interchangeably. Now, as it is not always a phenomenon of visual appearance that seems to come into play, it is better to use a more general term to indicate the metapsychic way of knowledge. Some authors use the expression metagnomy. He took the word cryptesthesia. The two expressions complement each other. The metagnomy, meaning knowledge, and cryptesthesia, the way to this knowledge, is the unknown, hidden, cryptic sensitivity, which makes it possible to arrive at metagnomy. We are metagnome because we have cryptesthesia. We will call this unknown sensitivity the cryptesthesia. We will call metagnomy the knowledge due to this cryptesthesia. There is a gnosis, or knowledge, always due to this aesthesia. In usual cases, gnomishness is known to the aesthesia of our five senses, orthognomy. In exceptional cases, metapsychic, to cryptesthesia. This is metagnomics. We use our sixth sense, or cryptesthesia, to acquire metagnomy, simply the knowledge we acquire by psychic way and not by physic way. And now we are at the second part of the video, the experiment and observation. The desmonition can arrive by the vibration of the reality of the real event or fact that occurs, metagnomy by cryptesthesia, in a dream or in hallucination or vision. For example, a person dreams that her husband was killed or dangerously injured, and she received a telegram the next day announcing he was killed. The desmonition can also arrive by telepathy, intervention of the emotion of the person. A person can feel what the other person feels. For example, a person A distinctly saw his brother, person B. The vibration of the person B's emotion struck to death. The desmonition can also arrive by seeing the astral body radiation of the dead person, the projection of an image, or the astral etheric body. For example, a woman saw her fiancé came to tell her goodbye. It was not her fiancé on himself, but the astral or etheric body of her fiancé. Another example, Charles Richet's wife dreamed his grandfather is very sick, and in his bed, with Charles' mother standing, leaning over him. His grandfather was dead 2 hours before. About the collective truthful hallucination, two persons or more see the form of someone else floating. Two persons or more dream about the same person. There is collective monition, a funeral vibration that can be perceived the astral body or etheric body or telepathy or a vibration of reality. All in all, there are at least 1000 good observations of hallucination or true dreams. People who have had true dreams or hallucination almost always keep the memory of them tenaciously. Everything happens as if the intelligence were then strongly shaken, and that this shock is engraved in the mind in such a way as to make it indelible. Either it is chance, or it is shaking of the intelligence by the vibration produced by the event. Each time there was only one hallucination or dream, and coincidence within 3 hours with the moment of death. There is effect and cause. The effect is the hallucination, the dream, the vision to the imperfect knowledge of the event, and this effect can only be explained by a special sensibility, a sensibility that he called, without being able to specify further, the sixth sense. About the monition, other than death monition, the sixth sense come to play not only for death warning, but also manifest for tiny events or insignificant facts that our normal senses cannot make us known to us, so too there is fragmentary knowledge of reality. Example 1. There is cryptesthetic dream, symbolic dream, extrasensory perception of the place, about someone being at a specific place, whereas the person disappeared, the body was found at the location described. Example 2. A person has the sensation or feeling of someone else. A person feels that her upper lip had been cut, whereas it was her husband had injured his lip on his boat trip. Example 3. A dream that it happened something to someone and learned 30 minutes later the person just had a serious accident. The person barely remembered the dream he had had, so he had spoken in the half-dream state. Example 4. A vision that an object is here in the present, whereas the object is concretely not here, but was here in the past. The person described perfectly the object, shape, dimension, and colors. Example 5. An impression of knowing something, that something is off or wrong, knowing a fact. Mrs. B and her brother have the impression that her husband will arrive without his train ticket, looking for the ticket to give it to the employee in charge of receiving the ticket. He does not find it, and to his great annoyance cannot give it. For the first time in his life he had lost his ticket. Mrs. B, by way of the sixth sense, so understood that the train ticket was misplaced. Mr. B did not find his train ticket in his paper until a year later, by very great chance. About the personal case of Charles Richer, there is example of accidental, spontaneous cryptesthesia occurring during dreaming or while awake. Example 1. He visited a lady who had never visited his laboratory. She said to him, "I dreamed of snake, or rather of eels, last night. It was more like 2 eels than 2 snakes, because I saw their white bellies and their shiny skin." The dream was surprisingly consistent with what he had done the day before. That day he had experimented at his laboratory with eels, 2 eels. Naturally, he had not spoken of this experience to anyone. Example 2. He, in his library, at 10:30 p.m., he dreamed of there is a fire at the opera around midnight. His wife and doctor come back from the opera and told him there was a real threat of fire. But telepathy or not, it doesn't matter. It is always a special aesthesia that is at stake. It is always the sixth sense that reveals a fragment of reality to us. About the experience that established the reality of the sixth sense, he did experiment with normal people, with sensitive in their normal state, with hypnotized sensitive, with sensitive in the state of spiritual trance. Hypnotic state and state of spiritual trance are similar. The normals, when they have some metapsychic phenomenon, become at that moment, for a very short time, sensitive. His personal experience made with various sensitives who have only exceptionally given proof or clairvoyance. Example 1. When he said, "Do you know my friend's name?" to Mariette, a 19-year-old girl under complete hypnosis, she said the letter of the person named after 30 minutes. There are also very good examples of cryptesthesia. The person gets the drawing or text, which were put in envelope. All those present are totally unaware of the nature of the drawing or writing. About the experiment on non-sensitive people, it seems to result from these numerous attempts that in general normal people have little or no cryptesthetic power, but what is meant by normal person, he would be tempted to believe that there are a few more sensitive people than we think. The sixth sense is a work in a normal, non-sentient people. In normal adults, it's a 1 per 16 or less who have lucidity and telepathy. No, in children, there is no trace of lucidity or telepathy. He did few experiments on normal people. He briefly mentioned them in his treatise on metapsychic. What is certain is that some sensitive, who appears quite normal, have a great power without a recourse to hypnotism or spirit, while most individual, or to put it better, almost all individual can never say anything. They are, if he can use this mediocre expression, but which convey his thought, half sensitive, tenths of sensitive, hundredths of sensitive. About his experience with a sleepwalker or somnambulist, numerous examples of lucidity among somnambulists from 1800 to 1850. At that time, some somnambulists whose clairvoyance was extreme, especially Alexis Didier, who gives irrefutable proof of his lucidity. In somnambulism, many examples of second sight, a phenomenon called lucidity. There is also a theory of survival. They wanted to explain all the facts by assuming the existence of spirit, the dead communicating with the living. Many examples of cryptesthesia with telepathy. Example 1, Dr. Chaumet brings a medal, Alexis said, which was absolutely correct. This medal was given to you under singular circumstances. You were in a student attic in Lyon. A worker to whom you had rendered a service, having found this medal in the rubble, offered it to you. Example 2. Mr. Vivant goes to find Alexis to find something he thought was lost. Alexis said to him, "There are 4,000 franc notes," which was correct, and he added, "These notes were not stolen from you. You will find them in your secretary." However, on returning home, Mr. Vivant finds the 4 notes at the place indicated. Example 3. Cryptesthesia without telepathy. Blindfolded Alexis knew all the cards, not only of his game, but also of his opponent's game. Example 4. A magnetist, Dr. F, tried to make someone, the somnambulist or sleepwalker, to tell what someone else would do at a certain time telepathically. Example 5. Mary, sleepwalker, unprofessionally lucidity. She found how a mind died, circumstance, object, specific place where the objects are. With sleepwalker, lucidity can go further by making premonition, detail, surpro, clairvoyance, magnetism. Example 6. The somnambulist hypnotized in their normal state with telepathy or clairvoyance reproduce drawing. The doctor, Karl Bruck, taking of course all the necessary precautions so that nothing was seen by the sensitive, made a drawing which he put in an album. Charles Richet does believe that indeed hypnotism, like the state of spiritual trance, also often favorable to cryptesthesia, is not at all a necessary condition. They seem to him to prove in all evidence that in spiritual trance, as in somnambulistic trance, there is a knowledge of reality by extrasensory way, that is to say, by the sixth sense. About the veridical or truthful experimental hallucination, it is necessary to distinguish two groups of true hallucination, the fortuitous hallucination, which are observation, and the induced hallucination, which are experimental. The latter are very rare, but in certain cases it has been possible in the sensitive to provoke, without obviously telling them anything, a hallucination. An individual agent tries to appear to the sensitive percipient and he succeeded. In the phantasm of living and in proceeding PSR, we can find curious examples of it. Example 1. Professor Blanc from Harvard University had the idea of projecting his astral body into the bedroom of one of his friends, 800 meters away and living behind a hill, but his friend saw him without having been informed of this experience. Example 2. Spark magnetized his friend Clive, who expressed to him the desire to see a young girl who lived in Woodworth and to be seen by her. Clive, after about 20 minutes of magnetic sleep, declared that he had seen this young girl, that he had looked at him, and that she had covered her eyes with her hand. 3 days later, the experiment was repeated. Clive, magnetized, declared that he thought he had frightened the young girl, for after having seen him, she had fallen into a kind of syncope. Example 3. MB, at a distance of 50 kilometers from London, tried to appear to 2 young girls, the Verity ladies. The eldest said that she had seen a ghost standing by her bed, coming towards her. She had called her younger sister, who had also seen him. In a letter, Miss Verity said, "I only recovered after some time from the blow I received, and I keep a memory of it so vivid that it cannot be erased from my memory." What it is interesting in this veridical experimental hallucination is that it is both experimental and collective, since 2 people had the same experience. Example 4. The Reverend Clarence Godfrey, around 10 p.m., tried to transport himself in a spirit or his astral body to the foot of a friend's bed. Here is what this person wrote the next day at 3:20 a.m. I woke up with a start and with the feeling that someone was in my room. The apparition did not frighten me, but it left me so moved that I could not go back to sleep. Of course, she knew nothing of Mr. Godfrey's intention. About the approach monition, it is a popular notion to which a proverb of all countries allude. Quand on parle du loup, on en voit la queue. Quand on parle du soleil, on en voit les rayons. Quando si parla del sol, il sole spunta. Speak of the devil, and the devil appears. It is not a hallucination, it is an illusion, and although the expression seems singular, it nevertheless deserves to be preserved a true illusion, because somewhere further on he truly appears in flesh and blood. He believed that many of his readers will have been able to observe sometimes in their lives some phenomenon of this kind. Example 1. Carol sees in his room in Towcester the image of his brother who lives in London. Before he has had time to get over his emotion, he hears a knock on the windows. It was his brother, this time in the flesh, who had come from London expressly to see him and who had made no announcement of his visit. Example 2. Mr. Stevenson was sitting at home at 7 a.m. next to his wife. All was quiet when he distinctly heard this word, "David is coming," word which Mrs. Stevenson had not uttered. David, Mr. Stevenson's brother, used to come home only at 9 o'clock at night. 3 minutes later, the doors opened, and David arrived quite unexpectedly. About pragmatic cryptesthesia or psychometry, an object that belongs to a person or another is presented to the sensitive person. It does not seem important that the material object is seen or manipulated by the sensitive person himself. It may facilitate his sensitivity, but very often there is lucidity independently of the object presented. From this object presented, it emanates vibration, which allows the sensitive to give some detail on the person to whom the object belonged. In the experience already reported, there is most often an inextricable mixture of telepathy, simple cryptesthesia, and pragmatic cryptesthesia. About very scientific experience have been done in a laboratory. The sensitive was a young student named Vandam. Example 1. The telepathy only experiment when there is an agent and a percipient, that is to say, an individual A, agent, who transmits his thought to an individual B, the percipient. It therefore seems, according to Mr. Brugman, that alcohol diminishes the power of inhibition, of reasoning, of attention, and consequently that it increases the power of the unconscious. Everything happens as if the unconscious were more sensitive than the conscious to the sixth sense excitation. The distance does not seem to have exerted any influence. By certain substances ingested, for example alcohol or brome, probably potassium bromide, the cryptesthesia seems to have become much more intense. If there were only this experience in science, it would be enough to conclude that the sixth sense is real. Example 2. Some flashes of lucidity when a person, Madame Leonard, in a trance spiritic, describes with detail a photography before this photography have been sent. Another example, when she says the title of a book in a library, that someone indicates only the location. She even explores mentally the library that she doesn't know and describes a painting and a statuette. It is quite possible, as Austin rightly thinks, that indication of number, name, drawing are more difficult to access for the sixth sense than emotion, feeling, memorable event, the psychological characteristic of such and such an individual. About the sixth sense in general, some phenomena that can be attached to the sixth sense. Premonition is closely linked to the knowledge of the present. Divinatory wand, hazel rod, swing a pendulum, maybe a rabbinic force act on our sixth sense. They don't know, surely unconscious behavior. Despite all the documents that have been published on this subject, there are still some uncertainties about this curious phenomenon. About the hypothesis on the mechanism of the sixth sense, this is the most difficult question in all of metapsychic. How can the vibration of reality bring knowledge? There is telepathy or mental suggestion. There is an extrasensory transmission from man to man. This transmission is probably done by the transfer of an energy going from a human brain to another human brain, vibration of the reality or vibration of thought, transmission of a scene, a drawing, an act. Mental suggestion or pure telepathy is the transmission of an interior thought, an interior will, not being translated by any external gesture. Telepathy or the hypothesis of a vibration of external mechanical reality, ancient or present, the thought of A, which will be transmitted to the thought of B, is very often unconscious. The metapsychic view of the drawing by the sixth sense, rather than the mind reading, mental transmission, pure telepathy seems rare. Finally, as regards the telepathic hypothesis, it seems to him, 1. That it is only acceptable, 1 in certain rare cases, 2. That in very many cases, one can hesitate between the telepathic hypothesis and the hypothesis of the vibration of reality, 3. That in quite a number of cases, it is impossible to admit the hypothesis of telepathy, and that the hypothesis of the vibration of reality is then the only one, absolutely the only one, which is acceptable. But with or without the hypothesis of telepathy, we must always admit the sixth sense. About the hypothesis of vibration of the reality, metapsychic knowledge cryptesthetic metonymy, we have the three orders of vibration of reality: those that our senses perceive, those which our senses does not perceive, but which are revealed to us by detector, those which are unknown and which are detected neither by our senses nor by detector. Every day science discovers, and every day it will discover new vibration. The sixth sense is the sense by which we perceive some of these vibrations unknown. Vibration of reality be it, but what realities around us in the present as in the past, or to conceive all of these intersecting vibrations without being confused, it's appalling. About the hypothesis of pragmatic cryptesthesia, in certain cases, an external object seems necessary to bring about the cryptesthetic knowledge. Most often, no material object needs to intervene. The sixth sense does not require a material object, palpable and palpated, visible at a distance without the help of our normal senses. The material object may help somewhat, at least for some sensitive, but it is not essential. About the spirit hypothesis, vibration of ancient reality, reincarnation of the spirit, hallucination, dream, vibration of reality, spirit hypothesis, the sixth sense, that is to say the perception of certain unknown vibration of reality, the history of Hertzian wave, is there to show us the ubiquity of this vibration of the outside world, not perceptible to our senses. He also made a test of a classification of the vibration of reality involving the sixth sense. A. There are first of all vibrations which are translated in the mind of the sensitive person by an image having the appearance of matter, a ghost for example, but which is not matter, since with extremely rare exception, only character sees them, and that no material trace of his passage is left by the ghost. It is probable that there is in fact a ghost, only an idea without material reality. It is idea, add-on, that the sensitive amplify, embellish, enrich with a multiple detail. There is simple monition, but this monition is, by the imagination of the sensitive, transformed into an image symbolic. For example, Wingfield has the indistinct, unconscious notion that his brother has had a serious accident, is perhaps dead, and he translates this notion by constructing a ghostly image, astral body of Wingfield's brother in almost material form. B. Vibration of the thought of the agent A, which vibration will resound on the thought of the recipient B. Simple telepathy. For example, Oshorovitz, without making a movement or a gesture, mentally command a sensitive, an act which is performed. It is simple telepathy. C. Vibration of a current material reality, a drawing, a name, a letter, a fact. For example, a drawing put in a sealed envelope is guessed, a letter is read. In many cases, as the drawing and the letter are known to the agent, this group may belong to both the telepathic B group and the C clairvoyance group. It is therefore necessary to establish a division and to say that for the vibration C, some can be explained by telepathy, others by clairvoyance. So Osowiecki makes a drawing which absolutely resembles the one he made. It is possible that it is a telepathic vibration, yet it is extremely more probable that it is clairvoyance, because Osowiecki is reading a letter that Madame de Noailles gave him, a letter which was drawn at random from among three others, and of which consequently no one can know the nature. D. vibration of an ancient material reality, an ancient event, a name, a fact, the vibration or knowledge. Some may be telepathic, others cannot be explained by telepathy. For example, Mrs. Piper talks about Aunt Annie. Maybe it's telepathic, since the lodge knew Aunt Annie's names, but she gave Mrs. Verrall details about Aunt Susan, details Mrs. Verrall didn't know. In short, the hypothesis of telepathy and the hypothesis of a vibration of reality merge in some cases. All telepathy is a reality, while not all realities are telepathies. Whatever the explanation adopted, astral body, telepathy, clairvoyance, it is the existence of the sixth sense. In some cases, the sensitive seems to see, in others, he seems to hear, in others, he speaks without knowing why he speaks thus. In many cases, it activates the table or the planchette. Everything is mystery, except the fact of a supernormal knowledge of the will, but because one does not explain a fact, it is not a reason to deny it. About symbolism in the implementation of the sixth sense, through hallucination and no objective reality, the ghost is not a reality, it is an emotion of unconscious intelligence that prompts Wingsfield conscious intelligence to piece together his brother's image. It is a sensation which causes the formation of an idea, giving the word idea the Greek meaning image. Many examples of symbolism will be found in a truthful or veridic hallucination. For example, Charles B., who has just died, appears to Emma, saying to her, "I am going on a trip, and I come to say goodbye to you." There was, therefore, in all likelihood, only a vague notion of the death of Charles B., a notion which was transformed by Emma's conscious intelligence into the vision of a ghost who comes to farewell. In the experience of reading a story, in the reproduction of a drawing, there is no longer any symbolization, but there has been only the very abstract reproduction of the drawing and of the writing. Sometimes, however, there is a curious mixture of graphic reproduction and ideas. So, when Gillet shows Osowiecki a paper with the description of a battle between a crocodile and an elephant, Osowiecki sees only the battle, the flowing blood, without directly writing what is on the paper. Similarly, in the normal state, it is sometimes a visual image, sometimes a sound that evokes some idea in us. Since we have admitted that the reality vibrating around us awakens the sixth sense, it must first create an image in the intelligence. This image is sometimes precise, sometimes, on the contrary, it is symbolic, as in many true hallucinations. In the case of the precise image, it is very simple. Despite the opaque envelope, the sensitive see, as if there were no envelope, what is drawn or what is written. In the case of the symbolic impression, on the contrary, there is an ill-defined sensation which is transformed into a hallucinatory image, but sometimes, as in the case of Alice, who sees the photograph of Héricourt, as in the case of Osowiecki, who sees individuals praying to the muezzin, or a fight in a zoological garden, or a knight without fear and without reproach. In the portrait of Pilsudski, there is a mixture of a confused general feeling and a precise visual impression. All these explanations are only premature because these two kinds of excitation of the sixth sense always remain deeply mysterious. If it is true that a real thing vibrates around us and involves our sixth sense, or it is possible for the conscious intelligence of the sensitive to make a choice, or are they not confused with each other in an inextricable mixture? It is better to reserve our opinion and to not conclude, let's stop at this simple proposition that there is a sixth sense without claiming to penetrate its incomprehensible mechanism. About the future of the sixth sense, besides even assuming some practical application to the discovery of the sixth sense, isn't this a new viewcast in our entire psychology, since the unknown radiation, absolutely unknown, penetrate even to our intelligence, we can legitimately suppose that our intelligence is modified by this perpetual radiation of all things. This unknown world with unknown force which vibrate around us perhaps exert a profound, albeit occult, action on our ideation. Can we affirm that our ideas, even those which seem most spontaneous, are not created, or at least influenced, by the unknown vibration, very powerful perhaps, which surround us? Our mind is not only the result of a cerebral constitution acquired by heredity and memories accumulated in memory by a long series of adventures. Probably it is modified, transformed, excited, or inhibited by all these unknown forces. All the same, he imagined, rather arbitrarily, moreover, that there are more of them today than there ever were. Perhaps we are witnessing, without realizing it, because it is always very long, a development of the sixth sense in humanity. If you are still here, thank you so much for listening or for watching. To make a bigger conclusion of this book and video, just retain these two concepts, the sixth sense and the vibration of the reality. I think with these two concepts we can understand the other layer of the reality, the metapsychical layer, or simply the psychic layer, and our psychic abilities. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.